right now we're talking, I'm actually going to focus on cloud workload protections. And so this sort of also includes Defender for IoT, but because Defender for IoT is its own thing. So what I did was for part one, I'm doing all the cloud workload protections for all the other services. And then I left Defender for IoT fully for tomorrow. So that's part two is really going to be all on Defender for IoT. And then because there were some questions on Lighthouse and Arc, I added a few slides in here, and I was going to do a demo of Lighthouse, and I'll probably will still do it again on during the Sentinel Day, which is the last day. But I'm also going to do one now because it'll make things clearer when you see my setup, because I have several subscriptions and none of them, and some of them I have full access, some of them I don't. So I'll demo that as well so that you can see. It doesn't take very long. And then it'll make more sense on all the various different things that we'll be doing. Okay, so let's get going. So you've been hearing all about Defender for Cloud and how it is a fantastic cloud security posture management tool, and it's free. But now we get to focus on the cloud workloads protections. I have some slides. I'm going to try to leave the majority of the time for the demo, but I do have some slides that I want to cover and some features that I think I better explain, especially the difference in the various plans and things like that are better explained with a slide deck. So I'm going to start with that, and then we'll go into the demo. Let's see. All right. So we're talking about, when we're talking about cloud workloads protection platform, we're really talking about the Defender services for a variety of services. So that's Defender for servers, Defender for databases, Defender for containers, and so on. It's not just Azure. So as I go along, all of these, are at least the three major ones, are going to apply to AWS and GCP as well, natively. And I'm gonna also show in the demo how to onboard those the AWS accounts and the GCP projects as well. And like I said, IoT, and I know there's references to IoT. I'm gonna do part two completely on IoT tomorrow because it's just its own beast. Okay, so this is a great overview of the various workload types that we can protect, regardless, as you can see, of whether they are on Azure, on AWS, on GCP, or even on-prem too. I want you to keep this in mind, especially as I speak to the different Defender plans that are available for workload protections. And also within Azure, you'll see some services that are traditional, hard to protect because of the number of logs that they produce, like ARM or Azure Resource Manager. But with Defender for Cloud, you're able to protect that very highly critical area as well. So we'll cover that as well. And while the CSPM plan for AWS and GCP is completely agentless, that's not the same for cloud workload protections. The plan for servers in AWS and GCP does require agents and some extensions, basically for MDE, which comes with Defender for servers. So one of those agents is the Azure Arc agent. It connects to the servers to Azure Arc, and it is a prerequisite for other extensions. It's kind of like Azure Arc is what allows us to look at these servers that are on AWS or GCP or on-prem as if they were Azure servers. So we get to have access to all the various different configurations. The agent, it requires the OS config agent on GCP machines, and it also requires AWS SSM, Systems Manager Agent, for EC2's instances. And I'm actually going to show you the commands that you can use to check, because some of the AMIs, some of the AWS images come with it and some don't. I'll show you the command to check on that. And then extensions. There's also the MDE extension, which is an integrated license for MDE for EDR capabilities. There's an extension for vulnerability assessment that either requires Qualys or TVM, which is our threat and vulnerability management. I'll go in the demo, like how do you go about configuring this. And then there's the log analytics extension, which it ensures that the workspace has a security solution installed. Actually, so it's not going to work, and I'll actually tell you how to check on this. If you're using the log analytics agent, you need a security solution installed. If you're using the AMA agent, which you can now with Defender for Cloud, it needs the security and the security-free one solution. So I can tell you how you can check and where you can add them in the workspace itself. And there's a similar situation for Defender for Containers. It's actually also going to use Azure Arc Agent, the Defender extension, and the Azure Policy extension. For containers, there's also Kubernetes audit logs that needs to be enabled for AWS and GCP connector level. That's in order to get threat detection alerts for the control plane. And I'll go into details on this as we go. And then finally, for databases too, Azure Arc is also going to be used. The SQL servers, the extension for SQL servers on machines is going to be used. The log analytics extension, and there's another one called the automatic SQL Server discovery and registration. I'll show you during the demo where you can configure these agents and extensions to be configured automatically. Some of these are managed at subscription level. So you'll see that they're going to be like grayed out when you go to configure them, when you go to configure AWS and GCP. But I'll show you where to configure them in the subscription level. This is just a list of the various protections that we offer. One question I always get is whether RDS is included. And yes, it is included. And like I said during the demo, I'll show you how to onboard both AWS and GCP and Azure via Lighthouse. So I wasn't gonna do that demo, but I'm gonna add it now. So Defender, so let's start with some of the Defender. So we're gonna have Defender for Azure Service Layers, which is really 3 different plans. Is the ARM, Azure Resource Manager, is Azure DNS, and Azure Key Vault as well. And this is one of the areas where it's super easy to enable. Is literally one click, but it really makes a huge difference. And I was able to generate some sample alerts for DNS, so I'll show you those alerts as well. All I did was resolve for a DNS entry that I knew was going to generate an alert from one of the servers, and that generated the alert. So I'll show you how that shows up. Some detection examples for Defender for Resource Manager is gonna alert on any type of suspicious activity, like exploitation toolkits, anti-malware being disabled, connections from known malicious IPs, any type of lateral movement, and things along those lines. And by the way, this will work regardless of whether the threat comes via the portal, via the API, or via the CLI. Okay, for Defender for DNS, it's gonna detect suspicious and anomalous activities, like, for example, data exfiltration from your Azure resources using DNS tunneling, malware communicating with command and control servers, for example, DNS attacks, so communication with malicious DNS resolvers, and communication with domains used for malicious activities like phishing and crypto mining. Actually, one of the ones that I used was for phishing. I think it's like Microsoft, but with a 0 instead of an O. And if you resolve for it within your VM, it'll send the alert that you're going to see. And you can also use Logic Apps to automatically block outgoing DNS queries. Basically, you can create a logic app, and I think there are some that are already created, so you can get them from our repository, where it'll basically update the NSG rules to block that outgoing communication. So you could technically attach automation to this to prevent it going further. All right, so Defender for Key Vault. So this includes protection for any kind of unusual or potentially harmful attempts to access or exploit the Key Vault account. So one thing to keep in mind with Defender for Key Vault, it is designed to detect activities caused by stolen credentials. So even when you get the alert, even if the application or the user they look all right to you and they seem legitimate, it may still be that the activity is not. So I would investigate any alert that you get from Defender for Key Vault. And you can obviously take action after that to reset or roll the secrets or get rid of them and update them. But there's actually, in our documentation, we have really good documentation on step-by-step on what to do when you have one of those alerts. Now, Defender for Servers is probably the one that gets the most attention. I get the most questions on this one for sure. So first of all, multi-cloud, multi-platform. So that means it's AWS, GCP, Azure, and on-prem. And that could be also on other clouds. Somebody was asking about Oracle Cloud yesterday. So yes, because the same, servers on any other cloud, we can do Defender for Servers. And that's also Windows and Linux, so it's multi-platform as well. And it's also integrated with Defender for Endpoints, so you get antivirus protection, you get a fantastic EDR, endpoint detection and response, you get automated self-healing, and you get vulnerability assessment. And you actually get a few options of vulnerability assessment. And again, I'll show you during the demo how you can configure that. And then on top of that, you also have some features that are optimized for cloud environments. Like we're talking about yesterday, adaptive application control was one of them. One of my favorite ones is just-in-time VM access. And I'll actually show you this in action. And I know that Intranil shared a little bit of this, but I'm going to show you exactly the changes that it does before and after when you enable it. Then we have file integrity monitoring, which is like a change management. And then adaptive, and actually file integrity monitoring has some new features that you can take advantage of with the new AMA agent that I'm going to show as well. And then you have adaptive network hardening, which again, I'm a big fan of this one. And there are two levels, P1 and P2. So I want to show you that slide that covers that. Is it here? Yep, there it is. Okay. So you actually get all the security goodness that comes from Defender for Endpoint, and that includes the attack surface reductions, you get the antivirus, you get the EDR with investigation and hunting for over 6 months of data. But some of my favorite features, which I'm going to cover during the demo, are on the P2 offering. That was the just-in-time. And by the way, just-in-time VM access is not just for Azure VMs. It's also now available for AWS EC2s as well. And some that are missing here because they didn't fit. Docker host hardening. So Defender for Servers will also identify unmanaged containers that are hosted on Linux VMs that are running Docker containers. And it will generate recommendations based on CIS Docker benchmarks. And then the other one that didn't fit here was the file list attack detection, which generates detailed security alerts that just makes it easier to triage and correlate and respond faster. I used the other one, so I'm skipping that one. Let's see. And then Defender for Servers, like I was saying earlier, it also includes vulnerability management. And you actually have a few options. So you can do, there's two main options that you get. The first is Qualys. And for the main Qualys option, you don't even need a Qualys license or even a Qualys account. Everything is handled within Defender for Cloud. And then you get the other option is, so that Qualys is going to use an agent. Now, TVM, or Threat and Vulnerability Management, that I'm a huge fan of that one, and actually I'm going to show you some reasons why. In fact, actually, the feature that Internal was showing, I think yesterday, about where you can actually search for inventory based on what is installed, that actually depends on TVM to work. And it is a sensor, so there is no scanning. And then you also have another option, which is a BYOL, to bring your own license, and you can do that with Qualys again, or with Rapid7. So if for some reason, and I have no idea why, but if you wanted to do Qualys and use your own account, you could do that with the BYOL option. And again, I'll show you this during the demo. We talked, I think, about this already, adaptive application controls. It's really an allow list of what is going to run. One thing I want to note here, to be clear, there is no enforcement option currently available. So all you can do is alert on this feature on whether they run. Something that is not within your allowed list runs, but there's really no enforcement. It is great for organizations that have compliance requirements. And also good for ensuring that software is always in the approved version as well. So it's still a very nice feature to have. This one I'm a huge fan of. I'm actually gonna demo this. And like I said, it also works on AWS as well. Actually, you'll see in mine, because I have a few VMs, I can actually make use of this feature in AWS. Now, if you're wondering when to use just in time versus Azure Bastion, I don't know if anyone's wondering, but I've gotten actually that question a few times. So just in time is great to reduce costs, because the VM, if maybe a VM that is going to be accessed like 24/7, and when you need to be able to transfer files, that's also, if you need to be able to transfer files, then just in time is a great solution. Now, Bastion, if you have client machines that are locked down and you can't install RDP software, or when your corporate firewall doesn't have those ports open, 3389 or 22 for SSH, then Bastion is a better option. That's a little bit of a summary on why and when to use it. I actually wrote a whole blog on this adaptive network hardening. The reason is one of my servers, I left it open, and I just installed some lab for Purview, and so one of the servers was left wide open, and it got attacked. And so what I liked about the recommendation that came from adaptive network hardening is that it had learned, because it uses machine learning, it had learned what was expected traffic or legitimate traffic, right? So when it made the recommendation to take action, it actually recommended something that made sense for my system and still protected it. So it's probably what should have been configured since the beginning, but it wasn't. So I like that it wasn't, hey, just close all the ports. It was more like a customized recommendation based on what it had learned that was normal traffic patterns for that machine. So I'm a huge fan of it. And then we have file integrity monitoring. Sometimes people refer to it as change monitoring. So it's gonna monitor files or registry keys that have changed to basically detect attacks. It's gonna monitor for file and registry creation or removal, file modifications like changes in the size, the ACLs, the hash of the content. It's also going to monitor for registry modifications as well. And this is another great tool actually for compliance. And now FIM is using AMA agent. And that's important because AMA has data collection rules, and I'm really going to just mention it today, but I'm really going to dig into it when we get to the Sentinel presentation on Friday. But adding this data collection rules, you can configure and you can customize some aspects of the data collection, and you can change the frequency of the file collection. I'm going to show you today, because I have AMA agent, and I'm going to show you today what it comes with, like a default DCR. So I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the feature that I mentioned earlier, where Defender for Cloud's identified on managed containers that are hosted on IIS Linux VMs. And it really continuously assesses the configuration of the containers, and then it compares them with the CIS benchmark, and then it alerts if your containers don't satisfy any of those controls. So really useful features. And then the fileless attacks, which basically can inject malicious payloads into memory. In that they do that to avoid detection for anything that is scanning on the disk-based areas. So this type of detection is going to generate alerts with details such as like the network activity, which is super helpful when you're triaging and correlating with EDR solutions. By the way, I have my MDC instance connected to Sentinel. So, and I recommend that you always do whenever possible, whenever they're using Sentinel, because you're going to be able to triage actions that happen, alerts that happen on AWS and GCP and on-prem, with maybe something that is going on Microsoft and Defender 365, or something that is coming, I don't know, from some ServiceNow alerting, or correlated with everything else. So and I'll show that on Friday. Okay. This is the was I gonna use this? Yeah. So sorry, I'm actually switching to Defender for Storage. Sorry, moving on to Defender for Storage. So these are the various variations of detections for Defender for Storage. It's basically looking as to who accessed the account, what they do, what they did. I think the way that it has been explained to us is that you should look at this into two different categories. So first, you're going to get your stateless detections that don't require an actual baseline, like a behavioral baseline. So those are detections like malware that has been uploaded to the account, maybe misconfigurations in the container's access levels, host phishing campaigns, if it's actually hosting phishing campaigns on the account, any access from suspicious applications or IPs or Tor exit nodes, any successful and failed attempts to scan publicly open storage containers for sensitive information, and more. And then the second category are those stateful detections, which is where we actually build a baseline model that shows the behavior within the specific scope that is defined for each detection. So it could be at the subscription level, at the account level, container level, even at the file share level. And using those stateful detections, then we can identify the anomaly. So anything that deviates from that pattern that we have defined as the baseline model are going to be the anomaly. So things like suspicious access patterns that can impact accounts and things like that. And the way the service works is by looking at the telemetry logs. It's going to analyze the data, crossing it with different models. Then it's going to enrich it with our own Microsoft Threat Intelligence information that is constantly being updated with malicious IP addresses, malicious applications, phishing campaigns, and all sorts of information. We truly believe that this is one of the most comprehensive detection suites available, and we're very proud of this. Our solution, other competitive solutions don't include things like malware upload, distribution, data exfiltration, data deletion. That type of stuff is not typically included. Okay, I'm actually going to move through this one a little fast. This is what it offers. Native protection for Azure Blob, Azure Files, and data lakes too. Advanced detection is, and I think this is one of our biggest areas of power here. Is the Microsoft Threat Intelligence information that we're getting, and that we're making use of it within Defender for Storage. It's going to allow you to automatically respond using those workflows that I think either Nick or Indranil talked about yesterday. And then you can also, like I was saying earlier, you can and really should connect it to Sentinel so you can correlate it with everything else that is going on in your instances or in your environments. One quick note with Defender for servers, and I think Brian mentioned this, you have to deploy it at subscription level. You cannot exclude, and it's all or nothing. There is an option where you could deploy it at the log analytics workspace level, but it doesn't allow some of the features to work, especially the features that are P2 associated. But that's not the case with Defender for Storage. In the case of Defender for Storage, you can actually exclude storage accounts within a subscription or scope. So keep that in mind because it's good to know. So moving on to Defender for SQL. And even though Defender for Storage that we were just talking about is like an area that is really getting a lot of attention, believe it or not, SQL is actually our most common data source. So this is one that I think you're probably going to find very useful for your customers, or a lot of demand for it, I should say. And also it's also for SQL servers outside of Azure. It is, and it's actually not just SQL, as you'll see in the configuration. It's really all sorts of databases, including NoSQL like Cosmos DB. It is super simple to enable, and it requires no modifications. Then it also supports older versions of SQL Server, anything older than 2012. And it provides a set of security checks and threat detections that, to detect and to prevent. And like everything Defender for Cloud, it's really really a good thing to integrate it with Sentinel. Actually, I have Azure here. I need to update this to Microsoft Sentinel. I'm gonna build this. Oops, a little too fast. All right. So some of the detections include SQL injection, brute force attacks, so and data exfiltration, and among many, many others. I'm gonna actually demo how you can configure this by default. And like I said, we now support Cosmos DB for the same type of detection and hardening. And I'm just trying to move through the slides so I can jump to the demo so I can show you. But I do want to cover some of this stuff. Like, so Defender for containers, it helps with environment hardening. It protects your Kubernetes clusters where they are. So it could be Amazon EKS, it could be in GCP, it could be on-prem. So it's great service. It also provides you with a vulnerability assessment scanning. So for images that are stored in our ACR registries and running an Azure Kubernetes service. It also has runtime protection for nodes and clusters. And it actually generates, so it has threat protection for clusters and Linux nodes, and it generates alerts for any kind of suspicious activities. Again, I will show you during the demo where you can go and configure this, and even for AWS and GCP as well. So one note here, you'll need to install the Azure policy add-on for Kubernetes to be able to enforce how your clusters are used. So that's for the admission controls policies. It needs the add-on to be able to audit and to enforce those security capabilities that are inside the cluster. So for example, you can determine that privileged containers shouldn't be created, then it will be able to block any future requests to do that. Yeah. And like I said, you get vulnerability management too. And it includes the integrated vulnerability scanner for images that are on the ACR registries. And there are 3 triggers for an image scan. So first is on push. So whenever an image is pushed to your registry. The second one is recently pulled. So it's actually going to scan on a weekly basis, and any image that has been pulled within the last 30 days. And by the way, there's no extra charge for these rescans. You're just billed once per image. And then the third one is on import. So it's if Azure Container Registry has an import that it's going to bring images to your registry from Docker Hub, from Microsoft Container Registry, or from any other container registry, then Defender for Container Registry is going to scan any supported image that you import. Okay, and this, we actually partner with MITRE on creating the formal matrix for containers, and based on that, we built threat detection specifically matched to the matrix, and these are some of those possible threats that can be detected with Defender for Containers. So this is actually, there's a whole blog from the security, on the security blog, that talks about how we partner with MITRE and how these came about. So if you want some reading material. Let's see. Okay. Oh, so when we're talking about containers still, that wanted to note that the components are different depending on the type of cluster. So for AWS and GCP, we use Azure Arc. And like I said, I added a whole section on Azure Arc that is coming up in a bit, because I want to cover that before we jump to the demo. The workloads that protect the different nodes are actually set up as a daemon set, so they're automatically deployed on each node of the cluster. Okay, so these are the slides that I added. And this is, I'm actually going to show you how I set up Lighthouse today, because you're going to see me being able to see subscriptions that are not part of my tenant. And so I wanted to show you how that came about. Doesn't take me long to do it. Just wanted to be able to explain why you're seeing what you're seeing. And then with Azure Arc, you're able to see across anything that is on other clouds, on-prem, wherever it might be, you're going to be able to see that. That's what allows you to see if you're a managed security service provider, you would be able to see your customers as well. Now, Azure Arc is really only required for servers, for SQLs, and for containers. So anything that is in guest access, that's where you need Azure Arc for. You don't need it for everything, all the other services. This is a little bit of a summary of the areas where Azure Arc enabled servers are going to show up. Obviously, policy and Defender for Cloud, which is what we're covering today. Sentinel as well, which I'm going to cover Friday. And then other few services that we use it for. And okay, so this is a layout of, especially if you're a managed service provider, this is what allows you to get access to your customers. So you have the Contoso MSP tenant, you have your customers, and then you have the access through Azure Arc for this customer and for the FabricCam as well. So this is what allows you to extend that access across, and it's not just, see how in here for AWS, I'm just seeing servers and containers, and the other one would be databases. So that's what Azure Arc is really used for. I'll still show you how you get access to other ones. This is talking a little bit more about the same, and it provides in-guest policy and guest configuration functionality, and a little bit about the actual connection and how it is a secure connection. And finally, this is a slide that I actually shared on the chat yesterday, because we do get a lot of questions on this. So do I really have to pay for Arc? And the answer most of the time is no. It's going to be free as long as you're using it for, in this case, for Defender for Cloud, and for various other reasons, you're still not going to pay for it. So this is just to show you that there's no cost associated unless you're using it for other advanced settings that are not the ones that we're talking about today. Okay, so got to my demo. You see my personal subscriptions. which are these three. And then you also see these two other subscriptions, and you're wondering, where did this come from? That's Azure Lighthouse. So I'm going to take a few minutes to cover that real fast, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So my customers is Azure Lighthouse. And if you wanted to create, so the way that it works is that your customers or external tenants can delegate access to you to be able to manage, in this case, Defender for Cloud for them. And they can also do it for Sentinel, which I'm going to cover on Friday. And actually, in fact, this setup is really mostly for Sentinel, as you'll notice, but this is still the same process. And this is my tenant. I'm actually going to log in to one of my customer tenants so that you can see what they see as well. And they would go to service providers. Now, if you had a published offer on the Azure Lighthouse Marketplace, then they would be able to just delegate your access based on whatever you have in here. And you really should. That should be the ultimate goal. That's what our team does. We help you build this type of offers. But if you don't, which in my case, I am not a managed service provider, so I use that via template. So this is how you get this. This is my customer, and this is how this offer got here. It got via template. So I'm going to go back to the MSP tenant, which is my personal tenant, and I'm going to tell you how I created that offer. And then I'm going to show you the various access that you get. So I can either publish the offer or create the template. So I'm not going to finish it because I already have it set up. So I can delegate access at two different scopes, at subscription level or at resource group level. I'm going to leave it at subscription level because that's what I need for this. And I can delegate access to users group or service principal if you're doing some kind of automation. Obviously, we recommend that you do it at group level because your team, and sometimes it's a SOC, sometimes it's a different type of security team, they're likely going to need, you're going to have people coming in and out of the team, so you don't want to have to do it over and over again. I selected, this is my group, and like I showed you before, I really set it up for Sentinel, but still the setup is the same. And I have this group that is my SOC team, and so that's who I selected. And then I can select the various different roles. So in the case of Sentinel, I have Sentinel contributor, Sentinel, and reader, and some other stuff. In the case of this one, I should have some security admin and security reader type access. So I can, whatever it is, the access that I need, maybe I need contributor access level for some of the other changes as well, then I would put this together. And then I can, and by the way, I'm adding one at a time, but you can add more. You'll see as when I'm done with this one, you'll see it. Access type. So I can either do it permanent or eligible. Remember what we learned earlier about PIM? Pretty much the same thing. So I can either do permanent or I can do eligible. And for eligible, I have up to 8 hours once they activate it. I can require a multi-factor authentication, and I can require approval also to activate if I needed it. I'm going to leave it permanent for now, and I'm just going to add it. The one thing that I always recommend, so besides selecting access for whatever access you need, always, well, maybe if I choose group, I would actually see it. Oops, group. Lighthouse. So one thing I always recommend is that you add reader, just a generic, not like any specific kind of reader, just a generic reader role. The reason is if you don't add that, you're not going to be able to actually see your customers. So you're going to need this reader role. So when you're done, you should have whatever permissions or roles you need, plus reader as well, because that's what it's going to allow you to view this configuration. And then you're going to get a file, which you can download here. And then your customer would come and drop it here, and then they would have this set up. You can also automate this. I've seen all sorts of partners. Some partners have their offers in the Lighthouse. Some partners do this manually, and then they have scripts that do it for their customers. It's, whatever works for you. Ideally, you would have an offer or various offers in the marketplace, but it's whatever works for you. And so once that's done, and I'm going to close this here, and then you can actually see your customers in Lighthouse, and you can see the subscriptions that they have delegated access to you. And actually, I'm going to choose this subscription, and you can actually see the roles that have been assigned to you as well. Now, this is a little bit more complex setup, and I'll explain this because this is for Sentinel. I'll explain this on Friday, but you would see the groups that you have and the permissions that they have. So like if they have reader, if they have, in this case, they have logic app contributor, then you would be able to see that here. And then from your customer side, you'll be able to see pretty much the same thing too. Same type of information. And then you can also add, I'm actually looking at the subscription, what I wanted to look. Go back here. In here, they can, let's say they delegated access to one subscription, or they want to delegate access to another one. You don't have to redo this. Your customer can come here and just delegate the new subscription access. So what that does is that explains why you're able to see these two subscriptions here. And again, I'm not using it for Defender for Cloud. I'm using it for Sentinel, and you'll see the various reasons why on Friday. But this is the reason why you see this here, and you could also do the same things that I'm going to be doing here with my personal tenant subscriptions. You'll be able to do with this one as well if you had the right permissions. Okay, so now that I've explained this, I'm going to move on to AWS and GCP so you can see how you go about onboarding that. I'm going to start with AWS, and I'm just going to test because I'm not going to do this one's already done. And you can do the same thing or very similar, where you can actually do a management account, or you can do a single account. If you do a management account, you get to exclude accounts too. So if you have 100 and something accounts on AWS, and you want some of them to be excluded, you can do it like this. You do associate it with a subscription. So I'm just going to choose some random stuff, but keep an eye on this, because some of the configuration that you're going to see when you select the plans is at subscription level. So that's why this is important. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. Otherwise, it's going to error out for me. Okay. So we saw that CSPM is free, always free, but the cloud workload protections are not free. These are extra fees associated. You get to pick the level 2. Like I was saying before, you get plan 1 and plan 2 options. It doesn't, plan 1 is the basics that I was showing on that slide. And then with plan 2, you get additional. And actually, just in time is not here, but you'll see during the demo that it is actually part of it. For AWS, it is. And then you get to also configure. You get to also configure you can do it automatically. So the Azure Arc agent would be deployed automatically, and it's going to be deployed automatically as long as your AWS machines have SSM. And I'm actually going to show you. I think I left them open. Yeah, I left them open. Okay. So I actually have two. And then this one is Amazon Linux. And this is the command to check for, unless I can get to press enter, here we go. And it checks whether your SSM is active. It was earlier. And this one is Ubuntu. Yeah. Oh, this one came back. I think I'm killing this machine doing something. I don't know why. But this is what you would see. To make sure that it is running. If it isn't running, they give you instructions on how to install SSM, so you can you can install it. But in this case, both of them are running. So I can, and by the way, some AMIs come with SSM, some don't. So pay attention to that. And then there are additional extensions. These are currently on preview, but one of them is Defender for Endpoint extension and the Vulnerability Assessment extension. Now notice that you have those two options that I was mentioning as well, the Threat and Vulnerability Management, and you have Defender for Cloud Integrated Quality Scanner as well. So this is the agent and the sensor. Let's see. And and this one is grayed out because it's at subscription level. See what I mean about the some of these are actually going to come from the whatever you set up for the subscription. That's what you do in here. Let's see. And then for databases, you get pretty much the same thing. These are also these are a subscription, subscription level. And the ones that are not, like the Azure Arc agent and the automatic SQL discovery, then you can set this up in here. And finally, containers, which is pretty much the same. And this is the one that I was mentioning during the slides earlier, that this is actually required for runtime detection, threat detection of our Kubernetes. And it's also, actually it tells you in here, but it's actually going to create some other resources too. I don't think it's a whole lot, but it does create some storage, S3, Kinesis, and SQS, which is for the notifications that are going to come out of it. And then you can get to pick the retention in here too. Okay, all right. And then, so once you set all that up, all you have to do is download this template, which is, again, we're going with CloudFormation. If you're doing a managed account, it's very much similar to what we were talking about, master account and the child accounts. You will have to create a stack set. You can name your stack set, and actually you can show you what mine looks like. This is AWS in favor MDC, and the stack set AWS. I'm not very creative, as you can see. And it's here, and there's no gotchas. And the only gotcha that I got was initially CloudFormation had a bug where when you uploaded a file that had like parentheses on it, like, let me download this again. See how it creates a parentheses 6.template? It used to have a bug where you had to rename this to like not having a parentheses on it, but I tested it recently and looks like they solved that bug. So there are no more gotchas to mention to you in here. Okay. So once you do this, it's gonna take, you're automatically gonna start seeing recommendations. You're automatically gonna start seeing inventory, but it will take a while. I think they tell you it can take up to 48 hours to show, but really within a few hours, you start seeing resources. You might not see everything within a few hours, but you start seeing some resources. And the same thing, I'm actually gonna show you the only difference is, again, pretty much the same. Actually, they added this recently. It used to be you could only do single project, but now you can do organization and also exclude folders as well. But the only difference is, I'm just going to pick some values so that we can move to the next step so that you can see the options. Oh, I know why. See, you don't see containers here because I have to go to the single account to be able to see the containers. And maybe I need to. There we go. And okay, so now I see containers here. You get pretty much the same options, except in here it truly just in time truly is not supported yet at this time, not for GCP VMs. Very much the same settings for that are available, and also your vulnerability assessment and Defender for Endpoint. And for databases, very much exactly the same things that are available. I don't have containers on, but yeah, I could. And I actually so this one actually supports some extensions from for Azure Arc. And so you might, and this is the piece that I was talking about, where it actually uses it as a daemon set, so it's going to be deployed on each node automatically. And then the difference here is that you get a script, very similar to the setup that we saw yesterday. So you actually get a script, you get to run that script, and then you're done, and then you wait 24 to 48 hours, and you start seeing the resources, even though you might see some within an hour or so. Okay, let's see, what's next? So next is, all right, I'm gonna go through the Defender plans for this one so that we can see what's included and how you can do some of the various different configurations. So with Defender for Servers, by the way, I can change my plan here. I think someone probably showed you already this, but I can also do the same here. And yes, servers at a subscription level, all or nothing. If you do, the other option is to do log analytics workspace level, but it doesn't, even if you're playing for plan 2, it's not all of these features are going to work, so it's just not recommended. And I don't know if it's going to change in the future. I've requested it, but for right now, not possible. So this is where we go, auto provisioning, to configure what is going to be done automatically. And this is where they added the new agent, AMA agent. And as you can see, I have a new Azure Monitor agent configured. So, so you still have the option. This was the previous one, and in fact, it's still the default. And this one is really still on preview, but I wanted to give it a shot so that I can test some features. And so I actually have it sending it to the same workspace that I use for Sentinel. And you can configure, and by the way, if you need to do, see how it says in here, actually, I'm gonna click on it. You actually need some solutions the solutions are, let's see, where is that at? Solutions. Oh, here it is. These are the two solutions, security and security center free. And the thing is, like it says in here, if you selected the default one, it will have security and security center free enable. But if you selected a custom one, it may not have it. So you may have to install it. So just keep that in mind for this to be actually you'll be able to actually select it. Okay. And let's see, what else was I going to show you in here? You get with this, you actually get obviously full endpoint detection and protection solution for your VMs. You're going to get alerts from threat detected, and that goes for both the other Arc servers too, the ones that are on AWS and GCP. So, and then you can do the automatic onboarding of the servers with a VM extension. Actually, I'm going to show you where the VMs extensions show up. I don't know if you know that, but they actually show up for both Arc and virtual machines. So go. So these are my servers. And if you want to see the extensions, here, extension applications, and you can see Azure Monitor Windows Agent and that it was installed, and you can see this is MDE for Windows. So you can actually see all the extensions that are installed in there, just to verify that there are no issues. There's also a script that you can run on the device to check if Defender for Endpoint is working as expected on the device. The other thing, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but I do want to show you that you can integrate Defender with Defender for Endpoint. And what that's going to allow you to do is that you basically can come to security.microsoft.com and you're going to be able to see the devices here. So when I go here, in fact, this tenant All these devices that you see here, they're actually because of Defender for Cloud. I have 0 endpoints in here. So all of this data that you see here is these are actually EC2s. This one, there's one that is my GCP one. I don't know which one it is. Some of them are my Azure VMs. These are my Azure VMs. So this is the GCP one. So everything that you see here is actually because it's set up through Defender for Cloud. So you get to use all this information. You're going to actually get to see the vulnerability management information as well in here. And I'll tell you how to set it up. But all this access is actually coming because this is integrated. Let's see. VM vulnerability assessment. So I'm actually going to show you. You can enable it here, like I was showing in here. And actually, I want to show you that real fast. You can select whether you're going to use threat and vulnerability management or whether you're going to use the Qualys scanner in here. The other way that you can do that, I'm actually going to leave this open and open another page, is in the recommendations themselves. All right, so we go to recommendations, and actually I'm going to click on all and vulnerability. So machines should have a vulnerability solution. Okay, so like this one. This one, most of mine have it already. Oh, by the way, if you set this up to do automatically auto provisioning, it will take effect from there on. So any ones that you have already existing is not going to come back and fix them unless you come here and you fix them. So like I have all of these that are healthy. And actually, as you can see, these are the ones that are on AWS and on GCP as well. But then I have some that are not healthy. So I can come here and select it. And if I click on fix, I actually get these 3 options. So I get threat and vulnerability management. I get the Qualys, which is included with Defender for Servers. And I get this third option, which is that BYOL that I told you requires a separate license. So it's still Qualys and Rapid7. Qualys, I guess if you wanted to bring your own account, then you could do that. So this is how you would go about remediating them. You could do it from here, and then you can add them and configure them and fix whichever ones are not. And then from then on, any new ones will get done automatically. Let's see. Then the other, once you enable that, the other one that you're going to have is you're going to get the actual vulnerability findings. So you're going to get the recommendations in here, and I have quite a bit of high ones that are and it's all over the place. You see that recommendations are coming from these servers. Some of them are in AWS and some of them are in Azure, and I can see across. It doesn't matter where they are. I'm able to see which servers are affected. So one thing I wanted to show you is, I'm actually going to click on this and then come back. I can see, actually, I wanted to show you the actual server. I'll show it to you later. Basically, if you click on that server from Arc, it's actually gonna tell you whether it's an AWS or GCP. So even if your naming convention is not great, like mine isn't, you'd still be able to tell by looking at the Azure Arc server. It has it on the description. All right. So the other thing, I'm actually going to go to cloud workload protection so you can see, because I got to see the vulnerability assessment from here, which was the where we were landing before. I came to it from recommendations, but you can also come to it from here. The other feature I told you that I think Indranil showed this too, but I wanted to show you that AWS EC2s are also protected by just-in-time, as you can see in here. And I actually want to show you, I'm going to take one of these servers and this one, and I'm going to show you the networking configuration. You see how it has this network rule, and minimize this. This is what it's added when you implement just in time. It's actually going to deny access on those servers. Now, if I go through this and I click on request access, and I want to see this one from my IP for 3 hours, and I click on open ports, and if I have the right permissions, of course, to be able to request that, then I come to this server, and I should see a brand new, and here it is. So this is what it does. It adds a brand new security rule where it shows you the port open to my IP, and it's allowed. And it's going to be there for 3 hours or whatever I requested, and then it's going to remove it from there. So that's how JIT works. It works very much the same way for EC2s as well. I'm a huge fan of this one, you can tell. I wanted to show, how am I doing on time? I think I'm.
We actually have time.
Okay, good. All right. I'm going to keep on going because I have quite a bit left. All right. So that's FIM. I have file integrity monitoring. Where am I? Here. And this is the piece where I wanted to show you how the AMA actually brings on some new features, which are kind of neat, as long as it opens. Why is it so slow? I should start closing some of this stuff that I don't need. All right, let's try this. Did I break it? I must have broken it. Let me see. Oh, here it comes. All right. So initially, you're going to get the log analytics agent, but I wanted to switch to the AMA. So now it's showing the AMA, and I have one, and I don't think there's any changes on it because I don't remember making any changes on it. But if there were any changes, you would be able to see them here. Oh yeah, there were some changes. Okay, so you can actually see some files that were modified. Explorer and you can actually see the I think I attacked this server, so that's probably where it's coming from. Some of those configuration changes is possible. But so you'll be able to see the changes here in files and registry, and you can modify this query accordingly. But the one thing that I wanted to show you is the data collection rules. So because it is AMA, now you have this feature with data collection rules, and it creates a default one for you whenever you enable it. You can modify it, but it creates a default one for you. And so these are this Windows registry, Windows files, and Linux files that would be done automatically. And you can add more, of course. You can add additional ones. But it actually comes with a data collection rule out of the box that you can make use of. So if you don't know where to get started, you can start with that and then, modify and create your own depending on how noisy or how not noisy enough it is. Okay, and we have back to cloud workload protections. I think we covered adaptive application controls. So I'm going to skip that, but you basically know that it is a, maybe I'll just click on it real fast. Adaptive application control. You can actually see the recommendations. I don't have it applied, configuring any of them, but it has been learning all this time. So it'll give you recommendations on what you should be allowing or not allowing, which I think is, even if it's not, even if you don't have it on, I think it's still very useful to be able to get those recommendations. And then I told you about adaptive network hardening. Actually, I think I have an alert that I generated where I can show you adaptive network hardening in a little bit. All right, so one thing, obviously, Defender for Service enable on all of the machines. The only recommendation that I make for now is try to segregate, and I know that after the fact is kind of hard, but to segregate your VMs by prod test dev into different subscriptions. That's ideally what you would do. But if you're coming into a customer after the fact, I realize that that's not always possible. But for now, unfortunately, it's all or nothing. And let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into Defender for SQL, and I have it enabled. Actually, I never went back to here. When you enable this plan for this Defender for, or it's really Defender for databases now. I should stop calling it Defender for SQL because it's now more than just SQL. As you can see, you can enable it for Azure Cosmos DB as well. So I have it enabled, and I actually have recommendations. So I went every week, I think it's every Sunday, I get an email that tells me about these SQL database vulnerabilities that are associated with my database. I get something like this, and it tells me which SQL server it is. I only have one, so it's that one. And then it gives me an idea of the various vulnerabilities that are associated with my SQL database. This is what it looks like. Okay, and let's see. The one thing that I wanted to mention here, I'm gonna go back to environment settings and my subscription and my plans. On Defender for Storage, there's one of the challenges with Defender for Storage is being able to estimate, because if you see that it's actually billed by transaction. So one of the solutions that we have for that is a workbook. There's a workbook here that has price estimation. It's actually very good. And it actually has it for more than just that, but one of the ones that is really useful is for Defender for Storage, because it'll actually look at your subscription, and then within your subscription, it'll look at your various different storage accounts, and it'll estimate based on 7 days or monthly price how much it's going to cost. So depending on how, obviously I don't really have a whole lot of transactions here, but if you did, you'll be able to tell what the costs are would be associated with it. So this is here, and it's going to be, even if you don't have Defender for Storage enabled, you can still make use of this because it's just an estimation of what the costs are going to be. So, and also keep in mind that for Defender for Storage, you can exclude specific storage accounts. All right, I'm actually going to jump into some of the alerts. I talked about that. I talked about this. Oh, and actually I was going to cover inventory, but I think Indranil covered that yesterday. This is the feature that he showed yesterday where you can do install applications. That actually depends on Defender for Endpoint and depends specifically on threat and vulnerability management for it to work. And actually in my case, like if I'm looking for something specifically, then I can actually see the EC2s, the ARC, the actually they're going to show us ARC machines. Some of them are VMs in GCP. So like if I click, I'm going to click in here just so that you can see the information. And I can actually click in here and see how it shows me cloud providers GCP. So if I'm clicking on an ARC machine, I can see where that machine is coming from. And if it was AWS, I would be able to see that as well. That's the piece of information that I wanted to show you earlier. Let's see, alerts. All right, I'm gonna move to alerts because this is what we're here for. So actually I'm gonna order them by time. Oh, by the way, you saw some sample alerts here. You can, if you're testing Defender for Cloud, especially if you're testing integration with like Sentinel or something else, you can just click on this button here, generate a whole bunch of alerts and see if you see them on the other side. Plus it actually gives you a good idea of the types of alerts that would be like this one, SQL injection. It does give you a really good idea of the types of alerts that you would get in here. But I wanted to show you some real alerts. not real, but real that so this one actually came from Defender. All of these actually, all 1, 2, 3, these 3 came from Defender for DNS. This is the type of alert that you're going to see from Defender for DNS. And this was because I resolved a domain that was associated with phishing in one of those machines, and the same thing with crypto mining domain, and that's why I got that alert. So it's actually able to alert me if one of my VMs is using or trying to contact any of those known compromised domains or IPs or otherwise. Let's see I wanted to show you an alert that is see if I have one of those. So this is the alert when and I think these are actually might have been real alerts. Not like I actually did leave this VM open. So you can actually see when somebody's trying to access your VM, the host, the various IPs. Actually, this one was a real attack. I've been leaving this VM for the same reason, so that I can get attacked, so I can get some real alerts. But you can see this being hit from all over the place, trying to break in. But these are the types of alerts that you would get in real life scenarios. What I like about this is, and I took action already on this one because I closed the port, so because I couldn't even access it for a while there, so I closed it. But when you come here and it makes a recommendation, so this recommendation is actually coming from adaptive network hardening. That was one of the features that we were talking about. And again, it's not showing me the rule that I should have implemented, because I already did. But if I hadn't, it would make a suggestion based on what it has learned to be legitimate traffic, and then it would allow me to enforce that. And it would just, all I had to do is click and enforce, and it would go and add that NSG automatically to it. So that's the type of value that comes from having those types of features. And then the last one that I'm going to show you is this Mimikatz. But I have more Mimikatz. Okay, I have some in here. So this one was actually, I did this on purpose. It was me on the server. There's an agent from Attack IQ that is able to do this type of alert. And what I like to show you is that it actually shows you the actions that you can take. And then it also provides you with, why can't I? Hang on one second. It actually provides you with this link here. So if you wanted to get additional information from, because it is coming from Defender for Endpoint, this alert's coming from Defender for Endpoint, I can click on that link, and then I can go straight to the security.microsoft.com and related information about, this is my machine that is protected, and this is the various different actions that were taken in it. So I can dig in just like I normally would through the Defender 365 portal. So these two are very connected as well. And you're actually going to see a very similar pattern coming in Friday from Defender from Microsoft Sentinel. Let's see. I want to see how much I have left here. I showed you that. I showed you some alerts. Actually, there was one thing. Actually, I want to show you, sorry, two more things. One is the workbooks. Besides that price estimation one, there is actually a vulnerability assessment workbook too that you can make use of. And this is something that is editable too. So just like if you're familiar with Sentinel, it's the same thing. You can edit these and make them, you know, however it is for your customers' requirements. It's kind of a template to get you going, but you can improve upon this. But it gives you a really good idea of the vulnerabilities that are associated with the various resources. I don't have any containers, but there should be some SQL in here and a really good overview. And it comes all prepackaged for you. And of course, I clicked out of it. And the other one was the was another workbook, the active alerts one too. Where's the active alerts? This one. It's also really nice to provide to the customer, or if you're configuring it for the very first time, you can provide this information to the customer, which I think would be super useful about all the various different alerts, which ones are high, and then to be able to go investigate it and the resource that is associated with it, etc. And the last one, I keep clicking it. And then the last one is the governance. And we didn't really see that feature in action. But I'm gonna show it to you real fast. There's a governance feature. Don't know that anybody spent any time on it, but I'm a governance fan, so you're gonna get to see it. So this is one example that I set up, and I actually set this one up for AWS. No, this one's for MFA. So this is for internal for my Azure configuration. You can do this also for AWS and for GCP. So I can say that any MFA related alerts actually could be alerts, and it could be recommendations, I think. Yeah. So, recommendations. In my case, I chose all the MFA ones. They're all going to be assigned automatically to this user, and they're going to have a time frame of 7 days to remediate it. And they can also could apply a grace period. And I also can notify the owners if they have them open and overdue, and their managers if I have access to that information here. And I can do the same thing in here for AWS, which I actually set up. That's fine. Governance rules. I have these all where CloudFront alerts are going to be assigned to this test 2 user. They're going to have 2 weeks to remediate it, and I'm going to notify them if they don't. So what that happens is that when you go to this recommendations here, and I'm going to click on my CloudFront recommendations, they're automatically, well, right now they're overdue actually. That's why they're overdue, because like these are automatically assigned to the whatever test user, should show up in a minute, test 2 user. And if they haven't completed, it was due back in June. So yeah, they're really overdue. They would show up as overdue. So that's the governance feature that was recently added to MDC. And you can see that workbook here too. There's a workbook that kind of gives you the whole information on what is pending and what is not pending. I don't really have a whole lot of users, so I just assigned these to those users. So that's what we see here. Okay. I think I'm actually a little bit overtime, aren't I? I think I'm 4 minutes overtime. Is that correct, Indranil?
You could go on. We do have some time.
Okay, I think I covered everything that I needed to do. The only thing that I didn't cover was standards and assessments. So, okay, I might as well finish it. So let's go here, environment settings. For Azure subscriptions, you have policies, the typical Azure policies that Brian, I think, was talking about earlier. For GCP and AWS, you have something called standards and assessments. I don't know if Brian went through this. I don't remember seeing it, but you get this default compliance regulations, and you also can create your own too. And so the standards and assessments are equivalent to like policies and initiatives in Azure. And out of the box, you get this many, but you can also create your own. So you can create your own. I'm actually going to view assessments, And this one, and view, actually, I'm not going to remove it. I'm actually going to create a new one. You can actually create a new assessment, and you can create it based on templates. And all it is a query that you can modify according to your needs, and you can make the checks that you need automatically. And from there, you can create your own assessments. So, and that is like the equivalent of Azure Policy, which is the engine that runs really Defender for Cloud on the Azure side. And you have the same thing for GCP as well. You have standards and assessments as well. And that is really all I had left. I'm pretty much done. So are there any questions? I think I'm going to stop here for questions.